Buenas tardes, estudiantes. This tutorial will review the verb tener and its uses. Let's begin by reviewing the conjugations of tener. The verb tener is irregular because its conjugations do not follow a pattern and must be memorized. The yo form of tener is tengo. The tu form of tener is tienes. The él, ella, usted, or one person's name form of tener is tiene. The nosotras, nosotros, and somebody's name yo form of tener is tenemos. The vosotros and vosotras form of tener is tenéis. And the ellos, ellas, ustedes, or more than one person's name form of tener is tienen. There are three uses of the verb tener that you have been introduced to in this course's content. The first use of tener is to communicate that someone has something. In order to communicate that someone has something, you will use the appropriate form of the verb tener followed by the noun that is being possessed. Another use of the verb tener is to express obligation by saying what someone has to do. In order to express obligation, you will use a form of the verb tener plus que followed by an infinitive. If you do not use que between your form of tener and the infinitive, you are not expressing obligation and your sentence will not make sense. You will also use the verb tener in tener expressions. These expressions communicate a state of being and should not be translated literally. Let's look at some examples. We will begin with saying that someone has something. Yo tengo un lápiz. Since our subject is yo, we conjugated tener in the yo form. Yo tengo is I have. The noun, or what is being possessed, is a pencil, un lápiz. Yo tengo un lápiz is I have a pencil. Tú tienes un examen de español. Since our subject is tú, we conjugated tener in the tú form. Tú tienes is you have. The noun, or what is being possessed, is a Spanish test, un examen de español. Tú tienes un examen de español is you have a Spanish test. Ella tiene una computadora. Since our subject is ella, we conjugated tener in the ella form. Ella tiene is she has. The noun, or what is being possessed, is a computer, una computadora. Ella tiene una computadora is she has a computer. Nosotros tenemos una clase de historia. Since our subject is nosotros, we conjugated tener in the nosotros form. Nosotros tenemos is we have. The noun, or what is being possessed, is a history class, una clase de historia. Nosotros tenemos una clase de historia is we have a history class. Ustedes tienen unos escritorios. Since our subject is ustedes, we conjugated tener in the ustedes form. Ustedes tienen is you all have. The noun, or what is being possessed, is some desks, unos escritorios. Ustedes tienen unos escritorios is you all have some desks. Next, let's look at some examples that express what someone has to do. Remember, our formula will be a conjugated form of tener plus que plus an infinitive. Yo tengo que estudiar. Since our subject is yo, we conjugated tener in the yo form. We will then add que after our conjugated form of tener. Yo tengo que. We finished by adding our infinitive, or what it is that someone has to do. Yo tengo que estudiar is I have to study. Tú tienes que correr. Since our subject is tú, we conjugated tener in the tú form. We added que after our conjugated form of tener. Tú tienes que. We finished by adding our infinitive, or what it is that someone has to do. Tú tienes que correr is you have to run. Él tiene que comer. Since our subject is él, we conjugated tener in the él form. We added que after our conjugated form of tener. Él tiene que. We finish by adding our infinitive, or what it is that someone has to do. Él tiene que comer is he has to eat. Nosotros tenemos que trabajar. Since our subject is nosotros, we conjugated tener in the nosotros form. We added que after our conjugated form of tener. Nosotros tenemos que. We finished by adding our infinitive, or what it is that someone has to do. Nosotros tenemos que trabajar is we have to work. Ellos tienen que practicar. Since our subject is ellos, we conjugated tener in the ellos form. We added que after our conjugated form of tener. Ellos tienen que. We finished by adding our infinitive, or what it is that someone has to do. Ellos tienen que practicar is they have to practice. Finally, let's review some tener expressions. When using tener expressions, remember to conjugate tener to reflect the subject of the sentence. Yo tengo sed. Since our subject is yo, we conjugated tener in the yo form. Tener sed translates to be thirsty. So yo tengo sed is I am thirsty. Tú tienes prisa. Since our subject is tú, we conjugated tener in the tú form. Tener prisa translates to be in a hurry. So tú tienes prisa is you are in a hurry. Usted tiene suerte. Since our subject is usted, we conjugated tener in the usted form. Tener suerte translates to be lucky. So, usted tiene suerte is you are lucky. Nosotros tenemos sueño. Since our subject is nosotros, we conjugated tener in the nosotros form. Tener sueño translates to be sleepy. So nosotros tenemos sueño is we are sleepy. Ellas tienen hambre. Since our subject is ellas, we conjugated tener in the ellas form. Tener hambre translates to be hungry. So ellas tienen hambre is they are hungry. This concludes our tutorial on the verb tener and its uses. Hasta luego!